Hey everyone, welcome back to the live coverage of Eternal Weekend Prague. I'm here with Skura and we're bringing you all the action from today's Legacy main event. There are 10 rounds we're going to be playing today, and right now we're going to be covering round number 4. So 6 more rounds after this before we cut into the top 8 that is going to be played tomorrow because it's gonna be a long day. So currently we have round number 4. Rodrigo Tagores playing Selesnya Dark Depths combo against Leonard Kreutz, who is on the Rakdos Goblins deck with some very interesting cards. So what can you tell us about that, Philip?
Yeah, so Rakdos Goblins is basically what you would expect for the most part. But first of all, it plays a card from Ixalan, which is a broadside bombardiers, menace, haste for 3 mana, and it has a boast mechanic. Sacrifice another creature or artifact, and it deals damage equal to 2 plus the permanence cost to any target. On top of that, stickers. There is a name sticker goblin that on MTGO, if you play it, has a different effect than in paper, because on Modo, you just roll the die and you get mana because Modo has like pre-calculated every possibility. While in paper, you need to bring literal sheets of name stickers, randomly choose some to have available. And now at the bottom of the screen, you can see these 3 name sheets with the 4 counters on them. So these are the name sheets that have been randomly chosen for this game. And from among 9 names, we will be choosing them for the name sticker Goblin. But right now, we see Cavern of Souls on Goblin and Goblin Lucky. Classic.
This is what I think Goblins, right? I think Jim Davis 15 years ago just casting Goblin Lucky turn 1, Wasteland turn 2 attack, and bring Siege Gang Commander into play. The deck changed a little bit over the years, but some things still stay the same. So Goblin Lucky is still one of the best openers the Goblins that can have. There's also obviously Either Vial, and this is, I believe, the Battle Cry Goblin, which is also one of the newer addition for the deck.
Yeah, and Goblin Lucky immediately taken care of by a very fancy Secret Lair, Swords to Plowshares, and Elvish Reclaimer onto the battlefield. So what can Elvish Reclaimer find in this deck, Martin? So there are multiple options, right? You mentioned Dark Depths as one of the choices, a part of the combo. Thespian Stage, Wasteland.
Yeah. Mostly you just want to find the combo, right? You're using cards like Crop Rotation and Elvish Reclaimer to put together Dark Depths and Thespian Stage in play. But there are other cards, obviously, this deck can fetch. Bojuka Bog, if you need to get rid of a graveyard, you can get a Wasteland if you want to set your opponent behind a little bit. So Elvish Reclaimer can definitely do a lot of cool things. It's also a blocker. If you just played against Goblin Lucky on turn 1, that does the job.
Okay, so we see Savannah into Savannah. So we have a very interesting matchup where, in theory, neither player really interacts, but then they kind of do. Like we saw Swords to Plowshares, we see the Crater Maker. Now we see Savannah fetch out a Wasteland. Crop Rotation, fetch out a Wasteland, and then Wasteland the opponent. Yeah, so the moment I said there is seemingly no interaction, we get interaction into interaction from Rodrigo.
And this also puts enough lands in Rodrigo's graveyard now. So now the Reclaimer is a 3/4.
Yeah, and now we see
he just goes for the beatdowns. He's just saying, okay, well, I have 2 3/4s. You only have a 2/2, so I'm just gonna start attacking and see where this goes.
Yeah. Green Sun Zenith really showing its strength there. So I think, that's a Swords to Plowshares, Sajiri Sandstep in hand. Or Sajiri Step. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice. So we can push through a bit of damage. I think we will name red. And just attacks with the one with protection, so leaves one behind. That's interesting, because he could just go all in aggressively, being ahead on life and the board.
Yeah, this is a question of
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
my opponent's missing land drops, but I have to decide. Do I want to go for the alternate route of trying to beat down my opponent from 18 life or something along those lines when their deck is full of creatures? They're gonna be able to play some creatures eventually. Or would I rather protect my own life total, even though it means that I'm not gonna deal 3 as opposed to my opponent dealing 2, which is still a good exchange for me most of the time. But I think what Rodrigo is saying, I'm gonna value my own life total here because I think there is still a higher chance that the game is gonna end with me finding the combo and just flying over for 20 with the Dark Depths token.
Yeah. There's the added bonus that if you leave the reclaimers behind, you can always activate them at the end of turn. So you've got both a blocker and some utility. And one of the cards fetched previously is Flagstones of Trocaire. 2 copies in the entire deck. And Flagstones of Trocaire is a legendary white producing land that, if it's put from the graveyard from the battlefield, you may search a plane. So basically, you can sacrifice it with Reclaimer, get a land from Flagstones, and then a get land from Reclaimer. So that's a bit of that value, let's say.
Goblin Ringleader, in the meantime, a very fair card for a format like Legacy, but it still gets the job done in the Goblins deck.
Okay, and so we see Thespian Stage searched out. It seems like the whole deck is signed or something. So what a way to flex on the opponent. Search out a land, immediately activate the other Reclaimer, find Dark Depths. This player knows what they're doing. Yeah, so very crisp pace of play from Rodrigo.
So Dark Depths is in play. Thespian Stage.
And we're just shortcutting the way it works. Because the actual end result is getting a 20/20 indestructible creature. But there are some rule shenanigans where we sacrifice one, the other has no counters, has to get sacrificed, get a token, legendary rule action. And that 20/20 is enough to get it done. Rodrigo up a game and 3-0 in the tournament.
Yeah, Rodrigo did go for some aggressive attacks early on with that Reclaimer, but eventually realized that this is not a matchup where I'm going to be, beating down with creatures. So I'm gonna slow down a little bit. I have the 2 Reclaimers in play, and that's going to allow me to find my combo pieces and just attack for 20 in the air. A little bit later on, a little bit unfortunate there for Leonard, who wasn't able to find enough lands. Got stuck on 2 for a little bit. Now both players looking at their sideboards. If you are the Goblins player, what kind of interaction can you bring against a deck that is trying to combo off using their mana, using their lands, using their mana base?
Yeah, so I'm looking through the deck list, and there are that many tools. Magus of Demon certainly stands out, and there are no copies in the main deck, so we just have 2 in the sideboard that get brought in. In the main deck already, we've got 4 Wasteland and 3 Reshadan Port, so that's a nice way to interact. Other than that, it's pretty difficult. Maybe some surgical sniping. For example, if they sacrifice a land early in the game, you can then maybe surgical it, but I think Magus of the Moon is what you want to be doing. There is one more thing, and that's the fact that we've got the Merit Lage creature, and that creature is an avatar that's a legendary creature, and this Rakdos deck plays Caracas. So you could actually Caracas this Merit Lage into hand. So this could also potentially come up, making the Depths player have to find Wasteland beforehand. So yeah, we've got overall Caracas and Magus of the Moon, I think, are the main ones. And then we've got Wasteland and Reshadan Port as well.
If you are the Dark Depths player, are you even worried that much? Is this a matchup where you are already thinking that you're probably pretty far ahead? The way the cards line up against each other, Elvish Reclaimer being a 1/2 against a 1/1 Goblin Lucky, like that is already a very important thing that just randomly happens. By the time the Lucky is in play, you're gonna have a 1/2 blocker that's just gonna sort of make the card useless. What are you thinking about bringing in? Do you even want to bring in cards like Path to Exile just to try to deal with that Magus of the Moon possibly, or what is going through your head?
Yeah, so certainly floating mana and pathing a Magus sounds okay. On top of that, there are some goblins that can really run away with the game, which you really wouldn't want. For example, you've got a card like Muxus, which hits really hard. Slingang Lieutenant that has the activated ability. Goblin War Chief. No, pathing War Chief isn't the greatest because you give them mana for a discount load. But you might sign in, for example, just a couple of copies, right, for good measure. For example, 1-2 paths, and that's it. And I could see a very similar case with Force of Vigor because it doesn't hit much because it hits Ether Vial only, it seems. But Rodrigo doesn't know if there are any Blood Moons coming potentially because he doesn't hit Magus either. So it's pretty tricky. It's pretty tricky. He could have maybe just a little bit of sideboarding and then adjust for the game 3 if possible, or if necessary.
Yeah, we keep running into this dynamic of closed deck list versus open deck list. Like you mentioned, do you bring that Force of Vigor against a red deck? Not knowing if they have Blood Moon. If you don't and they play Blood Moon, well, then you're gonna feel pretty foolish for not doing that. But then if you knew that they didn't have any Blood Moons to sideboard, then you obviously wouldn't bring it in. So maybe that Path to Exile seems a little bit better in that regard, because Magus of the Moon is a more likely card for Leonard to have, since it can also attack.
Oh, Pyrokinesis into Matron into attack from Lucky. Wow. That's unreal.
Enemy just makes it into play. Wow. That's a brutal turn by Leonard. Everything just completely going south for Rodrigo there. Let's see the Muxus trigger.
Wow, that's insane. That's insane. Badler. Okay, just Matron. Just Matron there. I mean, it's okay. You still got a 4/4 Muxus and a card. So you're in a fine position.
That's as big of a break as it gets, though. Just only getting one goblin out of the trigger. Obviously, it's going to be able to find something else here. Let's see if Leonard has anything else in his deck. That's a creature that would be good for this kinds of situation. I think there is a stage and Dark Depths already in play. So Rodrigo is threatening a 2020 token soon.
I think that's Yavimaya, maybe? I'm not perfectly sure what that card is. I think it might be Yavimaya because we cast Elvish Reclaimer. Yes, that's a Yavimaya. So we've got Yavimaya, and now Leonard, thinking through his options, finds Slingang Lieutenant. So basically saying, I'll get one more combat and then kill you with the trigger, and that should be it.
All right, that's the Thespian stage. Doing the same as in game 1. So there's going to be a 2020 in play. Rodrigo opting to do it right away, which in this format certainly makes sense. You don't want to give your opponent a chance to draw a wasteland, play it, and then in response blow up your combo. So Rodrigo does it right away. There's a 2020. Let's see if Leonard is going to be able to close out the game right now.
So these are Broadside Bombardiers. The card from Caverns of Ixalan, Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Now it will go to combat because it has Menace and Haste. Trigger Muxus, get a boost. Rodrigo thinking through his blocking options. The main thing is that Leonard is dead on the backswing if he doesn't kill now. Wait, actually no. Because Slingang Lieutenant says target player loses life and you gain 1 life. So you can just sacrifice a single token, go to 21, and you're golden. Wow. I didn't expect that to be relevant, but there we are. 21 life, more than 20.
All right, so let's see. What are Rodrigo's best options here? Obviously, he wants to block the biggest creature, but maybe he wants to block the Bombardiers instead. Other than that, Leonard only has 3/1/1, so that's actually not that much damage coming through.
Yeah, so I think he has to block Lucky to make it impossible to flash in Lieutenant. Because if he doesn't block Lucky, he'll just be put into play with the trigger. If he blocks Lucky and gets that trigger through, or the damage through, there is no way to play Lieutenant, at least as far as we know. So I think Rodrigo has to weigh some options. But my first instinct would be to block Lucky, but we have to go through the math. Yeah, the block seems to be lined up against Lucky. But then how much damage is going through? Yeah, I think he's between a rock and a hard place. Trying to figure out.
Can he even block Goblin Lucky? Like, isn't that just too much damage coming through?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to count that because it's also possible that you're right that you have to block Muxus, but then you might die anyways. Yeah.
I learned not to call this myself. I mean, I expect him to block this because then it's always wrong and the math is always different, and then you end up but yeah, it looks like he has to block the Muxus, but Leonard still finds enough to beat Rodrigo post combat with the triggers.
Yeah, what an opening that was! Turn one, we got Goblin Lucky, Ether Vial, Pyrokinesis. Wow, that was a hell of an opener. But now Rodrigo is on the play.
If I saw Rodrigo's hand, I would certainly think that he has the tools to get the job done. He has the 1/2 blocker for the Goblin Lucky. He has the turn 3, 20/20 flyer for the Goblins matchup, where that usually ends the game because they don't really have a lot of interaction for it. But especially with Leonard only really starting on Ether Vial, you're thinking, well, okay, well, that's a relatively slow draw for what Rodrigo is presenting, 20/20 flyer on turn 3. But then the Pyrokinesis dealing with the 1/2 Lucky connects, that brings Muxus into play. And despite Leonard pretty much breaking on the trigger, he was still able to win the game next turn.
Yeah. Now the fact that Rodrigo is on the play, there can't be any, Pyrokinesis Lucky shenanigans, because you can play your blocker on turn 1, then Leonard plays Lucky, and then you can even add even more to the board. Play Path to Exile, play Swords to Plowshares. Leonard double checking with the stickers, double checking the stickers. And I think putting like the number of vowels or something. So just preparing for the game. And they're both laughing about it. Rodrigo looking at the opening hand.
So does anything change in the matchup now with Rodrigo starting? Is this, do you maybe consider not having Goblin Lucky in your deck now that your opponent is playing 4 copies of a 1/2 blocker? Now you're on the draw. Like, is this perhaps too slow, or does your deck still just rely on it? Is that too crazy to board out a card that enables the crazy starts, putting Muxus in play? Like, would that just be too ridiculous?
I would be tempted to cut Lucky, but the 1/2 is deal withable thanks to Pyrokinesis, that's 1, and 2, Munitions Expert. So because a single Munitions Expert plus the Lucky on the battlefield is 2 damage, it might be trickier against multiple Reclaimers, but Rodrigo might not even play multiple Reclaimers because it walks into Pyrokinesis. So. Right. So I think it's an interesting dynamic because, again, even if Rodrigo has another copy, he might just not deploy it and just hold up Reclaimer activated ability.
This is the 3rd game in a row where Leonard does have the Lucky and Rodrigo does have the Reclaimer. So the 1/2 yet again staring down the 1/1. But I believe there was a Pyrokinesis in Leonard's opening hand. So are we going to see another ridiculous start? With Lucky possibly putting Muxus into play.
Yeah, so he fires it off immediately rather than waiting to see if there is another potential blocker. And that could make a big difference because Dryad Arbor can now be searched out. I mean, it still could in combat, but we can add Reclaimer and have Dryad Arbor. And I'll just throw this out because I have to. the necessary joke of the fact that Lennart has been very lucky. That's like
I think both players have been, blessed with some very good opening draws, and now that main phase pyrokinesis on that reclaimer kind of backfires as Rodrigo is able to play another copy of Elvish Reclaimer, making it so that Lennart doesn't get to profitably attack with the goblin on his own turn.
Yeah, because pyrokinesis says that you can divide the 4 damage among any number of target creatures. So if he had waited, he potentially could have sniped both reclaimers, which would make it a 0 mana 2/2, which is decent, rather than a 2/1. And Lucky essentially is a dead card, so it's almost like a 3/1.
Yeah, it definitely has the downsides waiting with the pyrokinesis there. But then again, it's not just the Elvish Reclaimers, right? You might be able to crack a fetch land to bring a Dried Arbor out of your deck to trade for the Lucky, right? Maybe just thinking, well, I'm in a situation where I would rather, sacrifice one of my lands. I'm going to set myself back a little bit, but if it means that my opponent can't put Muxus into play, then I'm still willing to do that.
So right now, passing the turn. Now Wasteland is active. We'll see where that goes. Tough situation. Draws a card. I think it now is like 5 or 6 in the opener. So Rodrigo isn't worried about any resources. Another Reclaimer. Holding up 2 mana.
Rodrigo's pretty much just playing with like the 15 same cards every game. he just has the 2 Reclaimers, the 3 same lands every game.
Okay, so now Lennart thinking through his options. We've got the Goblin deployed, Wasteland up, and just passes the turn, end step sacrifice, Flagstones of Trocaire, trigger. So you find a plains and then a card off of the actual Reclaimer trigger, which is another Flagstones of Trocaire, which we can again convert into a plains and another land. So it's a very, very slow and tedious way to get, free activations, basically.
I really like this deck. Last time I played Legacy, I played the 4-color Loam deck with Knight of Reliquary. It was also Punishing Fire, and it was like a deck that there was a lot of cool things going on, and I really enjoyed playing it. But now that I'm looking at Rodrigo's deck, this just seems like a better version of it, with like a much faster, combo finish with the Dark Depths.
Now, we haven't seen it, unfortunately, I think, but there are 4 copies of Knight of the Reliquary in the deck. We didn't have a chance to see it because we only see Reclaimer and lands. That's basically it. But there is some spice in that list. There is Ramunap Excavator even. I could see Ramunap Excavator replaying Flagstones of Trocaire, sacrifice Flagstones of Trocaire, and just going this route. So yeah, so Rodrigo is slowly assembling his Exodia, 3 cards in hand against Lennart's 3 cards in hand. He might even march up this Ether Vial up to 6 to be able to cleanly put in Muxus into play. And there is a judge question away from the table, so there might be a question about some interaction. What happens if something?
I think Lennart might be asking, or in this situation, it would certainly seem reasonable to be asking about the rules and the timings of, I have a Wasteland, my opponent has a Thespian Stage, and they have a Dark Depths. You can. Some players might be thinking, okay, I want to immediately kill their Thespian Stage before they can get Dark Depths in play, right? So that they can combo. Advanced players will tell you, okay, well, but there is maybe some interesting timing where I can let my opponent use the combo. I can let them Thespian Stage, copy the Dark Depths. And there's like a little window where when the Thespian Stage's ability resolves, there are the two copies of Dark Depths. one of them gets sacrificed. There's like a little window where you can still use your wasteland to kill their land before they can get the 2020.
Yeah, there are also interactions with Magus of the Moon and counters on Dark Depths. There could be also a question like you want to wasteland Thespian stage right now, and the opponent responds by copying the basic land in the face of the wasteland activation. Right? So what happens then? So there could be multiple questions to ask regarding the wasteland Magus of the Moon against this lands deck essentially. So I think we got the answer that we were looking for. So we'll see how Leonard proceeds from this position.
Yeah, I think with double Reclaimer, Rodrigo certainly has the means to just combo twice, right? Even through the one wasteland, like it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Obviously, Leonard understands that this wasteland is currently keeping him alive, or at least buying him some more time. So he's not going to be tapping that to cast another card from his hand. So you can certainly expect that wasteland to be untapped for the foreseeable future. But I think Rodrigo is going to start trying to force Leonard's hand and eventually activate the Reclaimers to find the combo. Leonard's going to use his wasteland, but I think Rodrigo is going to be able to just go off again the turn after that.
So this kind of taps into what you've been saying about the complexity of Legacy, right? Like there are just so many different interactions between cards, between decks, between matchups. That if you can't come unprepared, just good luck. You'll just spend half the round with judges just to make sure that this works this way, this works that way. Which could be an element of why people love Legacy, right? They love stimulation, complexity.
Something the chat is pointing out right now, which is very, very interesting, is that we are talking from the position of knowing both players' deck lists, but Leonard having an either vial on 3 counters in play, that adds another level of what if there is a Magus of the Moon in response to me activating this or doing that. So lots of different possible options coming into play here. Obviously, this is a closed decklist tournament, so neither player knows exactly what they are working with.
Yeah, and now we see, I think, a Wasteland was activated there. By the way, Rodrigo has his deck in hand. So yeah, we have come to somehow like a standstill.
Yeah, a little bit of a standoff. I think with the double Reclaimer, Rodrigo is still in a better position, but he does have to take into consideration these cards like Magus of the Moon and try to play around them. I mean, at some point, he might just be in a position where he says, okay, well, I can no longer wait. I have to hope that you don't have where you don't have anything else other than just the wasteland you're showing me on the table, and I have to go for it. But we'll find out.
Oh, okay. So we had a wasteland activation on the stack. Activate my vial. Okay, Magus is in play. Okay, Judge, I've got a question. So it feels like this particular turn has taken a long time, but it's so pivotal, right? Because on this single turn, the whole match lies, basically.
Yeah.
So do you yourself, Martin, do you enjoy games where it's like a cat and mouse game? Where like both players know they've got something and they've got interaction for the thing and they kind of like, don't know when to go for it and playing a bit of mind games. Do you enjoy this type of gameplay?
Yeah, in some formats, and some like not all the time. Like I also like to have some time between the rounds, so sometimes I prefer playing aggressive decks. But if you're well practiced in the format and there are these little interactions and little things, then I certainly enjoy those moments as well. Looks like there was a crop rotation resolving. So Dark Depths is in play.
Whoa! I blinked.
Those are Path to Exile. I think that was a Path to Exile from Rodrigo's hand. He says, "Okay, I'll target your Magus of the Moon, and I'm just gonna make a 2020 token and kill you next turn."
Yeah,
Yep.
I literally blinked, and we see the winner here on our screen. And now,
Congratulations to Rodrigo. Yeah, moving to, I believe, 4-0. Now we have another popular legacy player, Julian Knopp, playing Boris Painter, playing against Luca Samari, playing the Omnitel combo. Let me pull up the deck list real quick.
yeah, Omnitel combo, a deck that you yourself have some experience with, right? You've enjoyed playing some show and tells back in the day.
Yeah, I was just talking about the fact we were in Lille a couple of weeks ago casting the regional championship, and that was the tournament hall used for a legacy Grand Prix some years ago, where I was playing show and tell. Yeah, I was playing show and tell with Omniscience. I don't remember exactly what the big finish was, but looks like Luca is using 4 copies of Show and Tell to cheat Atraxa or Emrakul into play. Obviously, 4 copies of Omniscience. I see 1 copy of Dream Halls. We have some counter magic, as usual, Force of Will, Days, Lorien Revealed. Drawn of Dreams, that's an interesting one. 4 mana to look at top 7, put 2 of them and put them into your hand. Cunning Wish, obviously, Brainstorm, the usual package of card selection spells. There's 3 copies of Impulse, 2 Intuition, 1 copy of Flusterstorm. On the other hand, Boris Painter, Julian, pretty typical list, I think. Obviously with Grindstone and Painter's Servant for the combo, usually naming blue, so he does have 3 copies of Pyroblast, 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast in his deck as well. So a pretty good setup for Julian, with already sort of being pre-sideboarded with Pyroblasts and Red Elemental Blast acting as 1 mana, vindicate / counter anything you play for the matchup. So pretty good setup for Julian. This looks to be game number 3 in both players at the 2-1 record.
Yeah, 2-1 playing for this loss at this stage of the tournament might be you out of the top 8 contention. So it's just round 3, but the pressure could not be higher on these 2 players. And we see cantripping from Luca. So if Julian cannot close the game somehow, then Luca will have all the time in the world to spin his wheels, cantripping into the deck, assembling the perfect hand, sculpting it.
So once again, the combo is you play Painter's Servant, pick a color, then you find a Grindstone either by casting it or you can bring it back from the graveyard. There's Goblin Welder usually in these decks. You can get from Urza Saga. You activate it and you mill your opponent out since everything they have is of the same color. Obviously, that changes a little bit if the opponent has cards like Emrakul or other similar cards that let them shuffle their graveyard back in. So I believe that is the case in this matchup because this Omnitel deck does play 2 copies of Emrakul, the Eon Torrents, which has when Emrakul is put into your graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library. So that sort of prevents the opponent from milling you out right away. And that's why we might be seeing that Leyline of the Void in play for Julian.
Exactly. So that prevents that just pesky shuffling back in, which is pretty useful. Now, whenever I see an Omnitel deck, I immediately look at the opposing deck list and I'm trying to figure out what's the worst thing that my opponent could put into play. Now, Luca doesn't know it because it's closed deck list, but we can try to see if there's anything particularly threatening. And I'm not sure there is. Maybe the most threatening thing could be if Julian had played one part of the combo, for example, Painter, and could put in the Grindstone from the trigger. Maybe. But in general, it's not that threatening. And there are also 5 blasts in the main deck alone. And there are 4 Swords to Plowshares, double 4th Erlinges as the white cards of choice for this particular strat. Now, Urza Saga, last chapter, fetches out a 1 or a 0, and a 1 has been found, Grindstone.
Do you typically expect the Painter players to have the card in the creator package, or if you see your opponent being on some different versions of card, like do you just instantly see, okay, well, this is not the card deck?
So yeah, playing as the opponent, I would say that you have to assume it might be there. I've seen some stats actually about Painter and Khan, and I saw there is like around 2 copies in half the decks. That was the stat ish, which basically means that they either do have it and they have just a couple of copies, or they don't. So which is not very actionable. It's difficult to make. Yeah, I know it doesn't. It sounds very prosaic, right? But that's the truth. So it's really hard to gauge. So you need to kind of just adjust game 2, game 3, which is a sentence I've said multiple times today, right? Adjust, for next games. But that's magic, right? You have to keep adjusting between games because the opponent maybe plays different hate that you expected. There are also matches where you don't know what type of hate the opponent might bring. So maybe you pre-sideboard it against counter magic, but the opponent actually plays graveyard hate. So you have to readjust again.
All right. Well, looks like Julian says, you know what? I'm not gonna just go all in on my combo. I also have where's a Saga in my deck, so I'm just gonna make some tokens, and while you're too busy, setting up, trying to find your right combo pieces, or perhaps counter magic to try to stop me from comboing off, I'm just gonna make 2 constructs, and with that Great Furnace in play, thing, it is at each of the tokens is a 4/4 at the moment. So Luca on a serious clock right now.
This is exactly what I love about Urza's Saga decks, especially non-fair Saga decks, because you can always attack the game from a different angle if the opponent, slouches a bit and does nothing, or over focuses on one aspect of the deck.
All right, so now Luca with Omniscience in play, though. What's going to happen? So there's a Cunning Wish.
Yes, and Cunning Wish chooses an instant you own from outside the game, which is basically the sideboard. And then you play Shared Summons, and you search up 2 creatures with different names, which usually will be, Atraxa, Emrakul,
Get an
Fist
extra
Pump.
turn. Yeah, play them in, put both in play, get an extra turn. Next turn, attack for lethal in the air. So, yeah, Julian did have a decent start. He did have that ley line to try to stop the Emrakul from being shuffled back, and had a decent clock with the Urza's Construct tokens, but eventually one Omniscience in play is all that Luca needed to win the game, basically on the spot, by getting Emrakul, getting an extra turn, attack for lethal in the air. All right.
Yeah, exactly. Exciting round as every other round. So I'm excited for even more legacy. Top tables, players playing for the top 8. 4-0, 3-1. Excited.
We're gonna take a little break. Expect about 5 minutes, and we're gonna be back with round number 5. Me and Philip signing off for 5 minutes, and we're gonna be back. So stay with us.